You died. 2 words, white text on a black screen. Your character crumples to the ground and the world goes silent. You don't rage quit. You don't throw the controller. You just sit there for a second, and then you press start again. Why? Every instinct in modern entertainment tells you that failure should feel bad enough to make you stop. Movies don't punish you for looking away. Apps don't punish you for closing them. But this game just killed you for the 11th time, and you are already walking back toward the fog gate. Something rewired in your brain the moment that game came out. And it didn't just change how you play. It changed what an entire industry believed people wanted. This is the story of that rewiring. Back up for a second. Before this game existed, difficulty in games meant something simple. It meant more enemies, faster enemies, enemies with more health. You pressed a button, a number went down, and eventually you won or you didn't. Difficulty was a dial, and most developers were terrified to turn it up, because a frustrated player was a player who stopped playing. The industry had spent 2 decades optimizing against frustration. Tutorials got longer. Hand-holding got heavier. Games started marking your map with giant glowing arrows, so you'd never have to think about where to go next. The assumption was simple. People don't want to struggle. People want to feel good, immediately, constantly. Then a small Japanese studio, working with a modest budget and a director who didn't speak much English in early interviews, built a game that broke every one of those assumptions on purpose. No glowing arrows, no hand-holding, no explanation of what half the items in your inventory actually did. Enemies that could kill you in 2 hits within the first 5 minutes. A death penalty that stripped away your currency and forced you to walk back through the same monsters just to earn it back. By every rule the industry had agreed on, this should have failed. Instead, it became one of the most influential games ever made. So what actually happened in your brain when you kept coming back? This is where the psychology gets interesting. In the 1970s, a researcher named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi studied what he called flow. The mental state where a task is hard enough to demand your full attention, but not so hard that it becomes hopeless. Too easy, and you get bored. Too hard, and you get anxious. The sweet spot in between is where people report their deepest, most focused satisfaction. Most games chase the boredom side of that curve. This one walked straight into the anxious side and stayed there, but it did something clever. Every single death was fair. The enemy that killed you was always visible. The trap that ended your run was always something you could have noticed. There was no random number silently deciding your fate behind the screen. You died because of something you did, not something the game did to you. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. When people believe an outcome was caused by their own actions rather than luck, they respond to failure completely differently. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research on mindset showed that when people attribute failure to a fixable cause rather than a fixed trait, they persist longer and improve faster. The game wasn't punishing you. It was quietly teaching you that you were the variable, and variables can change. Think about what that does to a death screen. It stops being an ending. It becomes a data point. There's a second piece to this, and it's about reward. A famous and often oversimplified line of research into behavior comes from B.F. Skinner's work on reinforcement schedules, which found that rewards delivered unpredictably, after variable effort, create far stronger motivation to keep going than rewards delivered on a fixed, predictable timer. Most games in the era before this one rewarded you constantly. Experience points after every kill. Level up chimes every few minutes. A steady drip designed to keep your dopamine gently topped off. This game inverted that completely. You could spend 40 minutes creeping through a corridor, tension rising with every step, and receive nothing for it except the privilege of not dying. And then, finally, a locked door would open, Or a shortcut would connect back to a bonfire you'd already lit, and the relief would hit you like a physical wave. That relief wasn't a reward the designers handed you. It was a reward your own nervous system manufactured because you'd been starved of it for so long. You weren't playing for points anymore. You were playing for the feeling of finally exhaling. Here's the part that actually changed the industry, though. And it's not just the difficulty. It's the message underneath the difficulty. This game trusted you. It didn't explain its lore through cutscenes. It buried entire histories in item descriptions, environmental details, and things you'd only notice if you stopped and looked. It didn't tell you where to go. It assumed you were capable of reading the world and figuring it out. In an era where games were increasingly terrified, you'd feel confused for even 3 seconds. This one said, quietly, "You can handle this." And players felt that respect, even when they were furious, even when they were stuck on the same boss for 4 hours straight, muttering under their breath. There's a particular kind of trust that forms between a designer and a player when the designer refuses to lower the stakes just to make you comfortable. It's the same trust a hard teacher earns from a student who didn't think they could pass the class, and did. Once this game proved that trust could sell millions of copies, the entire industry noticed. Suddenly, brutal difficulty wasn't a niche curiosity. It was a business model. Sequels followed. Spiritual successors followed. Entire genres formed around the idea of fair but punishing combat, of environmental storytelling instead of exposition dumps, of letting players fail their way to understanding. You can trace a direct line from that original Foggate to games about samurai, games about Lovecraftian nightmares, games about robots and post-apocalyptic wastelands, all of them borrowing the same core belief. Struggle, when it's fair and legible, isn't the opposite of fun. It's a deeper version of it. But here's the twist most people miss. The genre this game spawned eventually ran into the exact same trap the old industry had fallen into, just from the opposite direction. Some studios chased difficulty for its own sake, forgetting that the fairness was the actual ingredient that made it work. Difficulty without fairness isn't flow. It's just frustration wearing a costume. A boss with an unreadable attack isn't hard in the way that respects you. It's hard in the way that insults you. The games that got it right understood something subtle. The challenge was never really the point. The point was giving you back your sense of agency, making you feel like the author of your own outcome again, in a medium that had spent years trying to protect you from ever feeling lost. So think about the last time you struggled at something outside of a game, a skill you were bad at, a job you almost quit, a relationship, a class, a physical goal your body kept telling you was impossible. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you already know the pattern. Failure that feels random makes you want to quit. Failure that feels earned makes you want to try again. The difference isn't the difficulty of the task. It's whether you believe you're the one holding the controller. That's what this game actually taught an entire generation of players, disguised as a brutal action role-playing game about a cursed kingdom. Not that suffering is good. Not that pain builds character in some vague self-help way. It taught something more specific and more useful. That the moments which cost you the most are often the ones that end up meaning the most, precisely because they cost you something. You put the controller down eventually. Maybe you beat it. Maybe you didn't. But somewhere between the 100th death and the first real victory, something in you had already changed. You didn't die.